Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All,
it was-
all four of you have the same initials, huh?
Pam, you're there you go. You're fading in and
You were
out.
jumping.
Yeah,
We had that last week. There was a whole bunch of that.
yeah, it was Cy. All right, let us, first of all, Reva will not be joining us. She's got another commitment today. So it's gonna be me and Rabbi, and let us begin with the blessing.
Oh,
Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, asher
Krishna Torah.
Blessed are you, Lord God, ruler of the world,
who has
sanctified us with your commandments
and commanded us
to
to
engage
in the words of Torah.
Okay, Rabbi, it's all yours.
Morning, everyone, and just came from a very nice outreach committee meeting. It's a new
Okay.
committee, and it's chaired by Jonathan Green and Ellen Ventura, and their job is to try to do outreach to potential new members so that we can grow our congregation and meet our budget needs. And so we had a very nice meeting, and we're optimistic. So that was the good news. Welcome to everyone this morning. I also wanted to show you this book, Founding God's Nation, Reading Exodus by Leon Cass.
Oh.
I'm reading parts of it now. It's many hundreds of pages. He's a University of Chicago. He originally was a medical researcher, then he moved into medical ethics, and now in his retirement years, he's become a Judaica expert. And he wrote an equally large book on Genesis, and now he came out with a book on Exodus. So if you have several hundred hours, then I do recommend it. And if not, you could read 3 or 4 pages at a time like I do. Okay, we are this morning on Perek Aleph, was Israel's escape from Egypt a miracle? So it talks about the whole concept of the Exodus in the context of miracles. Raising your right hand, how many people believe in miracles? Okay.
Yeah, right.
One more time. Okay, so we see the mystics versus the rationalists very clearly here. It's about 2/3 mystics, 1/3 rationalists. But Maimonides promised he might try to zoom in a little later, and so he'll help even the numbers.
what was your vote, Rabbi?
I was with the mystics.
You're a miracle
Okay,
person.
good.
Yeah. But I'm also with the rationalists, so I'm really both sides.
You're a fence sitter. You sit on the fence. That's what you do.
Yeah, he should be in politics.
Yeah,
I,
no, I wouldn't wish that on anyone.
being a rabbi is being a politician.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, right.
That's true. Diplomatic.
I've
You
learned that.
think?
I've learned that. Page
Diplomatic
34 in the, this is page 34 in the, in the book of Harvey Field's commentary on Exodus. It's Parshat B'Shalach, and we're going to read this Friday in synagogue. Okay, so any brief opening comments or questions or remarks or anything like that? Okay, Minya.
Reading the description of all the so-called miracles of those days, I was just thinking how different those stories might have been written when you have people who are more scientific, more into maybe believing things that are more rational. And they were really stories, if you want to look at it that way. I know Cy always says that they're stories. And I would like to think that scientists shine a different light on the same stories, and it would be interesting to hear how someone who's a scientist, let's say, would explain things like the Red Sea. I always believed that it was some scientific event that happened, either the tides had changed or something. And I never really thought of it as anything other than a move made by God to help the Israelites get away.
Interesting. And so there's, of course, been many people who tried to do scientific explanations of lots of things, the 10 plagues, the kashrut laws, etc. And a third view would be just to see them as metaphors, symbols of things that didn't actually happen that way. And that would work as well. But we're going to ask Bernie to rewrite this section for next week in a more rationalistic manner. And then we'll read that and compare the two and take a vote which version we want to put into the Torah. Bernie and then Marcia.
The first thing you have to accept is that there were really 2 million people doing this.
Okay, yeah, the Torah says that there were about 2 million people there. That's archaeologists have found dozens and dozens of McDonald's on one road, and that would be consistent with a population of roughly 2 million. I'm joking. Yeah, so I mean that 2 million people would be, just completely impossible for to live in the Sinai Desert at that time or any time. So that would be a problem. Yeah, Bernie. Marcia and then Sai.
So the statistics of the times, sometimes their numbers aren't quite right. The lengthy lives of many of the people in the Bible, etc. But the fact being that even though some of these miracles can be explained away, what the miracle kind of is that it happens at such an opportune time. Whether I know the business with the Red Sea is a sea of reeds, they say, and that at a certain time of the year there's very little water in it, and that's when they came across the Israelites went across, etc. So one can explain a lot of the things, but the fact that it happens at the right time, that it helped people, that's the miracle, I think.
Okay, so that whatever it was, it's not necessarily that it was so miraculous that it occurred, but that it occurred at the right time. I mean, we're all familiar with that when when you're in a rush and you go to the doctor, you have to wait 2 hours. When you're not in a rush, you have all day and you bring a good book with you, they take you immediately. So it's like that. Sai.
Not at Mayo Clinic.
They never take you quick.
They always take
They
you on
always
time.
get you quick.
I was inclined to think that some of the writers were irrational because of the irrational things they wrote about. For example, to me, it doesn't make any sense. You don't have to have lived 10,000 years ago to think that when they were ready to leave Egypt, the Egyptians would ply them with jewels, with gold and silver. I mean, to me, that's so irrational. How do you think? It just makes no sense.
Well, wait, when Elon Musk took over Twitter, and the top CEOs and the
Well, he's
CEO and the
irrational.
CFO that he felt he gave him like 22 million and 25 million. Same sort of thing, right? So maybe they had like a contract he had to buy out. All right, but you use the word irrational in a negative sense.
Yes, in that case.
Okay. Steve or Babette? Nan or Don?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that yes, God works through miracles, and we call them miracles, but God works through science too. And there's nothing where God cannot work, and people don't give him credit for it, and they say this is scientific. Maybe it is also God working through the scientific way of what has been happening.
Okay, so that would be maybe a fourth approach to this. I mean, there's a lot of ways to interpret it. I guess the basic thing you need to have is a desire to interact with the text. So you could read it for 2 minutes and say, this is in size words irrational, I'm not interested. Or you can read and say, this is irrational, but I am interested, I want to interpret it. And that's what the difference is between somebody who's engaging in Jewish text and somebody who's not. I mean, you have to feel that this is our tradition, that this is a way to enter into an extended dialogue about ultimate issues. So you have to have some desire to engage. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, we have a returning, one of our most intellectual members is back from the trenches, Pam Katz. Do you have any comments? She may have to drink the rest of her morning coffee first. But if you have a comment here, this is a good time.
No comment, otherwise it's good to be back and I missed all of you.
Okay. We are missing a few other people who are fairly regular. Maybe we can email them and say, we miss you. Come on back.
Well, Reva emailed me yesterday stating that she was not going to be here today. So that's her reason.
And aren't there a few others?
Yeah, there are a couple others. So,
Okay, who'd like to start reading? We're on page 34. A Perek Aleph, was Israel's escape from Egypt a quote unquote miracle? Okay, Minya.
Sorry about that. Was Israel's escape from Egypt a miracle? The Torah's report of Israel's departure from Egypt makes it clear that the liberation was not only a human effort. We are told that the people were led by an angel of God and by a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of cloud by day. When they arrived at the Sea of Reeds and saw the Egyptian army advancing upon them, God split the waters of the sea so that they could walk safely on dry land to the other side. Then God rolled back the waters upon the Egyptians, drowning all of them together with their horses and chariots. Upon seeing the miracle that God had performed for them, the Israelites sang out, I will sing to the Lord, for God has triumphed gloriously. Horse and driver God has hurled into the sea. You made your wind blow, the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the majestic waters.
Okay, stop.
I did.
Well, it's, Harvey Fields is gonna ask the question, did this really happen this way? I'm not sure I care. What's important to me is what I can do with the text, in various contexts. But let's take a look at the story. So what's happening? Who's there? Who's leading the people according to Harvey Fields?
Moses.
And
Moses.
what divine being is leading the people?
An angel of God.
Thank you. So, and according, so we have to deal with angels, right? Remember, yeah. And for classical Reform Jews, how many people were raised classical Reform? Only one, two, only two were raised classical Reform. And Steve, you were raised in Kansas City?
no, actually, I was raised in Oklahoma City, Temple B'nai Israel. And yes, it was a very classic reform, and the whole thing.
B'nai Israel, and it's
Yes.
still there,
Yes, yes.
but it's no longer classical Reform.
No.
Okay, and Nan, you were raised in which synagogue?
Nan, you have to unmute.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Temple Israel of New Rochelle.
Okay.
The classical reform Rabbi Jacob Shankman was the head rabbi there for many, many years.
In New Rochelle. And was
Yeah,
Amiel Wall there after?
Yeah, he was one of the success after Rabbi Annis. He was the one. Yes, you told me you interviewed there.
Yes, I got,
They-
they were gonna offer me a job there, but I didn't like it.
Well, but they are not classical reform anymore. They are becoming, according to friends of mine, they're moving sort of more conservative with more Hebrew. The men are all wearing yarmulkes and talit and things like that. Although women can now be bat mitzvahed, which in the 60s I was not allowed to do.
Mhm.
So in the classical reform world, everything had to be completely rational. And so any mention of angels was minimized or ignored completely. But we see that angels are everywhere. And so, so here the Israelites are being led by an angel of God. So you don't need GPS, which is good because they didn't have their cell phones handy. And Google didn't have the Google Maps yet. So the angel led them, and then there was a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of cloud by day. I think it's very dramatic. I like it. You know, it gives me a sense of feeling supported, that God sends an angel to guide us. And then there's these big support things, clouds and fire that are above us. It makes me feel secure, and it makes me feel that there's somebody there, that I can see something. Comments? Yes, Sai.
I'd like to think that you can accept the stories, but not necessarily believe them.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I mean, nobody's asking you to believe that this happened exactly this way, but it's nice if we can find some profound insight into it or some emotional sense. You know, the story has to speak to us in some way, you know, for it to be meaningful. But I don't think it has, I don't think there really had to be an angel there necessarily, but Pam.
I liked it because I like the idea of the cloud and the fire, etc. Because otherwise they're wandering off. This way they're at least going in a straight line.
Yes, and of course, the old joke is that why did they wander in the desert for 40 years? Because Moses, being a typical male driver, would not stop to ask for directions.
Yeah.
But yeah, but are they going in a straight line? You know, just because an angel's leading you doesn't mean that you are going a straight line. Marcia.
Well, isn't the story supposed to be that God had them, or Moses, I don't know which one of them, had them wandering around for 40 years until the older people died off, and it was a
Right.
new generation moving into Israel.
Right. But that decision may not have been made quite yet. That was probably a result of things that happened, such as the building of the golden calf and so forth.
Yeah, and the
But-
idol and all that, yeah.
Here they're just coming out of Egypt, so presumably God is focused on getting them out of Egypt and getting them across this body of water and making sure the Egyptians don't kill them all. So it's we're still at the early stages. Now, the splitting of the sea, that's pretty dramatic. And you know, there's a story that one particular Israelite, that the sea didn't split until somebody was willing to jump in.
Right.
And so this one particular Israelite, he was willing to take the leap of faith, they say. You've heard that expression. And so he was willing to step fully into the water. And if the water didn't start to recede, he would be washed away, presumably, or I don't know, eaten by a crocodile. And he did it, he believed, and then the waters receded and he was fine, and then everybody followed him. I think in Steven Spielberg's animated cartoon, The Prince of Egypt, I think that is shown. So I don't think that Bernie wants to take that leap of faith right first. He wants to see first Babette, let Babette take the leap of faith and jump into the water. If she's not eaten by a crocodile, then he'll believe that that's a good idea to do. So you have the more rational people that want evidence first, And then there's the believers who are willing to trust their gut instincts and jump. And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that's a very bad thing. But whatever you are, I suggest you follow Pam Katz's advice and drink a cup of coffee first. Steve.
Rabbi, well, it's like, taking your toe and putting it in the water to check the temperature to make sure it's either tepid or too cold or too hot. So, yeah, I agree.
Well, but it must have been frightening. You've got the Egyptian chariot guys, chasing after you in these big chariots with the machine guns and all these spears and axes and whatever they had. And you're just civilians, newly freed from slavery, carrying all this loot. And you're trying barely to get, even on dry land, even forgetting about the water issue, must be very frightening to hear that the rumble of the chariots a few miles behind you and think they're going to catch up to us in 20 minutes. I mean, you'd say, God, help me. And and you don't know if God is going to be there to help you. Okay, Minya, back to you.
Is that really what happened? Can we believe that God sent angels to lead the Israelites, split the sea for them, and destroyed the Egyptians by drowning them? Did Moses play any role in the victory? Did the Israelites do anything to save themselves? Is the Torah study an exaggeration beyond belief?
Okay.
The box?
Well, yeah, let's do the box.
I like this one because having been a teacher, you always wondered what kids go home and tell their parents. Well, this one I thought was a cute story. I told you what the teacher told us. We were told about the 10-year-old whose father was driving him home from religious school. What did you learn about today? His father asked. The child responded, the teacher told us about the Israelites escaped from Egypt. They came to the Sea of Reeds and built pontoons and drove across the water. As soon as the Egyptians and their tanks were on the pontoons, the Israelites sent in their air force and bombed them. The father looked with surprise at his child. Is that really what the teacher told you? Not really, answered the child, but if I told you what the teacher told us, you would never believe it. It was a miracle. There are always those who will deny the existence of miracles. They claim that the works of Hashem are simply natural phenomena. This was the attitude that many non-believers assumed in regard to the splitting of the Red Sea. It was caused by an earthquake, they might claim. It was just a freak accident of nature. To forestall any other beliefs, Hashem magnified the miracle of the Red Sea. He split not only the Red Sea, but also all the waters in the world. Even water that was in a cup gravitated to two separate sides. Because of this, no one could deny that the splitting of the Red Sea was a true miracle.
Well, what do you think?
Where is it written? Where is it written that all the waters were split?
I would have to find the original source and look up his footnote. It doesn't say here. This is written from an Orthodox publication, from the 1970s. Presumably, he must have gotten it from some commentator, so, but why did but Orthodox commentators will tend to exaggerate like this. So there must be some midrashic source for it. I'm sure he didn't make it up. They're not allowed to do that.
I'll have to ask cousin Mordecai.
But just because it's in one midrashic source doesn't mean it's accepted by anybody, but it's here. But you can see why they're basically doubling down, and the Orthodox are saying people like Bernie are just not believers. And not only did all the miracles in the Torah happen, but there were even more miracles just to, and if you don't believe that and you don't believe this, then They actually want to increase the irrationality of the original account because they're looking for people who are willing to believe, even if it's contrary to rationality. So Bernie would unfortunately not be a good candidate for ultra-Orthodox Judaism. And he asked me for a recommendation to join such a group in Denver. And I unfortunately told Bernie I couldn't write that recommendation. But you could see how for some people, this kind of a line of thinking might be quite attractive, that I not only believe what's there, but I even believe more. The more irrational it is, the more I like it because it puts me in a special group that's separate. We're the believers. And the fact that it doesn't make sense to outsiders is a good thing because it identifies me with a special group more so. Once your beliefs of the in-group are so similar to the out-group, it becomes much harder to maintain community solidarity. And that's one of the reasons that Reform Judaism is struggling, because essentially what most of us in this group believe is not that different from what secular American society believes. So therefore, there's not enough incongruence. Ironically, you want incongruence between your religion and between what's considered normal. That's my theory anyway. Comments, responses, Sai.
Yeah, but how do you get other people to believe in God? By telling them ridiculous stories.
Well, let's put it a different way. Now, I'm basing myself here on a sociologist named Rodney Stark, sociologist of religion. So he says, if you want a successful religious group, you have to have a relatively high cost of entry. If the entry is too low, there's not enough dissonance to maintain the group. So counterintuitively, if I wanted to set up a new religion, which I did think about at one point, when I was at the end of my time in Jamaica, I seriously considered it. And but I lost the support of a key supporter, and I had to abandon my plans. Otherwise, you might be reading about me in the history books that, this crazy rabbi in Jamaica started a new religion there. But
Yeah, man.
yeah, man, yeah. So, but the thing is that, okay, so you want to start a new religion, that you have to have dedicated followers. You don't need a lot of followers, you need dedicated followers. So you remember that UFO group that they all took poison, and they believed that they were going to go up to the spaceship of the aliens that was passing by. All right, so how did they build their group? They told these what quote I would say, quote unquote, ridiculous stories about UFO having, dropped things off and was going to pick them up. And 99% of people they told this story to thought what Sai would say, or what Bernie would say, this is complete Narishkeit, completely ridiculous. But the 1% or the 1/10 of 1% would say, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for. This is the truth. And these became their believers, and these people would follow them, would go with them around the whole United States, and they'd work for them, and they became part of their quote unquote cult. And so then they built up 50, 60, 70 people, and they were starting to work in web design, and they were making money, and they were all living together, and whatever it was successful. And what united them was a belief that nobody else believed. And so they couldn't just wander off. And if you remember, a few of them left the group for personal reasons. You remember that? And they didn't go with the group back to the spaceship, but they believed in it. So then the group left, and they were visiting a sick parent or something. And they were interviewed by the journalists, and they said, we're devastated. Our opportunity to go back to the mothership is lost forever. And we're here, but we're not supposed to be here, but we couldn't be with the group when we had to be with the group. So their believers cannot separate from the group because they need the other believers to believe. So there's a high cost of entry. The high cost of entry is a ridiculous belief. But once you're in the group, you feel tremendous solidarity with that group. You share values and beliefs and experiences. So it's amazing experience. If somebody's in the hospital, everybody else rushes to the hospital with chicken soup or whatever the UFO cult's equivalent of chicken soup is, to help that person because you're so united, you're closer than family. So that's the benefit. So ridiculous beliefs like this, where he says that not only the waters in the Dead Sea, but even in a cup of Pam's coffee would gravitate to two separate sides. Pam, if you could take a look at your coffee and see if it's working. I can't do that because my Starbucks cup has a cover on it. So, but I'm sure, I believe that in that cup, the coffee has now moved to two sides. And so does that theory make sense? Do you buy into that? Do you think? So that's why in our temple, I'm going to start introducing crazier and crazier beliefs in the coming months. Because if I can get everyone to buy into these beliefs, it'll help increase our communal solidarity.
Good luck.
All right, well, I've got one skeptic. I can't believe it.
Consider that an exit strategy.
I think you wasted a lot of time, Rabbi.
But do you see the rationale? Do you see the rationality of the irrationality for a specific group that might do that, such as the UFO? For the UFO group, it worked really well. Let's take another example. The Southern Baptists, they also believe in things that, you know, might be seen by outsiders as rather crazy and countercultural. You know, they're against gay marriage, for example, which has now become very normative. I mean, normal people accept the idea of gay marriage or all sorts of other modern ideas. The Southern Baptists do not. So they're going to lose people, but the people they keep are more dedicated because they feel the outside society rejects them and accepts these things that they view of as abhorrent. So you have a smaller group, but a more cohesive group, and that in the long run may be very important. Bernie.
Who's to say that the Baptists aren't the normal ones?
Well, because they're the minority.
So might makes right.
Well, let's say you go back to 1200s in Europe, you're in 1240, and the Catholic Church runs everything. And if you are someone who is a heretic, who suddenly starts in the bar telling people that they believe that Jesus was not, you know, part of God, you would get hauled before the Inquisition. And because the Catholic Church had control of the whole society, then they're no longer, that's a completely different situation. I'm talking about when you're a very small minority and you're trying to get a group going. And the way to get the group going is to start irrational beliefs. Whether the Catholic Church's beliefs at that time were irrational or not is irrelevant because they had complete control of the society. Marcia.
I would, yeah, the whole time you're talking, I'm thinking about the Catholic Church. I didn't want to say anything, but their initial beginning, which is in the Immaculate Conception, you know, that's really far out for people to be able. Maybe at the time that it was espoused, it wasn't as irrational as it is now. It's the only thing you could give.
Correct, that, or irrational beliefs are much more accepted by many more people. So it's a different situation, but for the Orthodox today, the Orthodox are a minority within the Jewish community in America, and they're certainly a minority among Americans, but it works really well because they're able to use their irrational beliefs to reinforce communal solidarity. Orthodox Jews want to be with other Orthodox Jews. They need to be with other Orthodox Jews. Partly they have practices which no one else does. They have to go to kosher restaurants, but partly because they have beliefs that no one else accepts. And that's a good thing because it keeps them separate.
Keeps them separate.
And it keeps them wanting to stay separate, and it keeps them needing to stay separate. Anyway, it's my theory of how to grow a successful cult in America.
So you're all set to go whenever you decide that you're going to do it.
Yes, but I don't have Evelyn's support.
I said, good luck.
That's as good as it gets.
So there must be lots of books written on how to start a religion. No, really,
Yes.
I'm not being, I think there probably are people who.
There was a period of time shortly after the rock and roller. Sorry, I'm having a senior moment. Elvis Presley.
Elvis?
Shortly after he died, there were many followers who felt that he was akin to the Son of God, and they were willing to start a religion about him. It eventually petered out, but initially there was a very strong following that he had that was ready to deify him, shall we say. So it happens with anyhow, my feelings on this story are, the purpose of the story is to show God gives man a choice. Does he wish tyranny, or does he want the belief in God to be man's supreme thought? It's leading to going to Israel, establishing a Jewish homeland with people who fervently believe that God is the supreme being, and that tyrants like the Pharaoh are not to be tolerated. And is this God's way of steering the Hebrews towards the belief in a supreme being? Is it? Who's speaking? I can't tell.
Who's speaking? Yeah.
Who's speaking?
Is it Donna?
It was Donna.
Maybe Donna got up for
She on
something.
the phone.
Okay.
Go ahead. Evelyn, go ahead if you want to continue.
No, I would like to hear someone else's opinion on this. This is my feeling on the story of the Exodus,
So
that it
repeat
is
your
God's
final-
way of leading the Hebrews away from being subservient to a tyrant to believing in a supreme being. And the whole story of the Exodus to me is, that's the purpose of the story, actually. Is it? Does anyone agree, disagree? I don't know.
Ask the question one more time. That the purpose of the
The
story.
purpose of the Exodus is to lead the Hebrew people into believing the one God, rather than being subservient to a tyrant or a political entity that would be the dominant political situation. God wants to steer the Hebrews towards believing him as the supreme being, and by guiding them out of Egypt into a land where they can worship him, will help them come to this conclusion. This is my thought on it. Somebody else's opinion may not be quite the same.
I'm curious to know when they started to proselytize as far as God was concerned. He was not an issue prior to that. They were not aware, they, being the Hebrews, were not aware of God. When did he come to prominence? For them anyway, as a group of people.
Marcia,
I think the whole Passover story is tied in with what you're saying, Evelyn. I think they had one God at that point, but they were a very minor part of the country of Egypt, and they were not cohesive. The story of uniting them together to make the move of Exodus was a major thing, and they had to leave Egypt if they were going to exist as a religion.
Yeah.
Right? So that was
Yes.
necessary. So it's also that's Haim's storyline that's taking us through Passover and into
And into Egypt, out of Egypt into the Holy Land.
Bernie,
You have to unmute.
Yeah,
Bernie,
I know. I
unmute.
tried and it didn't work. I have to think that Joe Sixpack wasn't into all of that. He's got this guy up on the hill telling him, let's get out of here and you don't have to make bricks anymore. And he's saying, okay, let's do that. I don't
That's a
think
po-
he's
it's a
at the
positive
point
reason.
in his development where he's looking at a supreme being guiding all of this.
I guess there's two ways to look at it. You could look at it in Bernie's way that this was a practical measure. And this was, people wanted to get out of slavery. Certainly the authors of Exodus are trying to spin it more in Evelyn's direction and say, this is not really related to, just trying to improve living conditions. This is a way to get away from having to be in a society where everyone's worshiping this pharaoh and go to a place where we can truly worship the one true God. So there's a religious explanation and there's a economic explanation. Just like, they're fighting in Israel now about, the new government wants to cut back on the law of return that allows some Russians to come to Israel if they have a Jewish grandparent, and that they don't practice any other religion, but they don't practice Judaism either. And so one of the Orthodox parties say we want to cut out the grandchild clause, and that these people are coming for economic reasons rather than Jewish reasons. And so, but where, that's all in the interpretation, I suppose, right? Everybody does things for economic reasons and personal reasons. It's not, it's almost never that you could say it's just one or the other, Okay, other responses to Evelyn's question is if I'm paraphrasing Evelyn correctly, is the reason for the Exodus so that the Jews can worship the one true God? Is that Pam or Minya or Nan? Nana's shaking her head. No, that's not the reason.
I agree with Evelyn. I think that's the reason.
Okay. You think that's really the reason, or you think that's the reason you like, or that's the reason it's in the text? Or I guess you have to differentiate, right? Because what the people may have done was for one reason, what the writer may have done is for a second reason, and how we interpret it might be a third reason.
Well, I think that's the real reason because it makes sense.
Yeah, at the same time, you cannot deny that you have a group of people that are oppressed, and they did have a leader who presumably God did speak to. I'm thinking of Moses, who said, I will lead you out and you will be a free people rather than slaves. So I still tend to lean toward the more religious aspect of it rather than the economical one. And again, what was said about the Egyptians bestowing all of this gold and jewelry upon them, my feelings are maybe it was reparations, or maybe the Hebrews demanded it of them. I don't know. I cannot envision. It doesn't seem logical that the Egyptians would willingly hand over wealth to the Hebrews as they depart. That seems illogical in terms of human behavior as such. If we look at things in terms of human behavior, we expect them to behave, let's say, more on the economic side. Hey, we can get free, we can make our own living, we don't have to be subjected to the slavery of the Egyptians. That's one way of looking at it. But if you look at it in a more enlightened or more religious way, to me, it still seems as if this was God's way of directing the Hebrew people out of the slavery to be able to worship him as God wanted the Hebrews, since they were the chosen people. He chose them to worship him. And so in order to make it feasible for them to worship him, he had to take them and put them in an environment where they were able to, and they were not able to in Egypt. So therefore, that was the first step. Does it make sense?
Yes, I
Or
think it
not?
makes sense that and this is true in any context, right? That to worship God properly, whatever properly means, and to have a religious society, you have to be in the right environment. And I remember when I spent a week in Mir Yeshiva in Brooklyn in high school, my first time in Brooklyn. You see what, I was thinking about becoming a rabbi in high school, so our neighbors suggested it. And they introduced me to a few people who'd become Orthodox. And then a year, I stayed in touch, and a year later, one of the guys, Mitch Cohen, or he became Chaim Cohen from Springfield, Massachusetts, he reverted. He gave up the Orthodoxy again and became pre-med. And so the way they explained it at the yeshiva was he'd gone home a lot for dental work, and he'd been brought out of the society, the ultra-Orthodox society, and then became too influenced by the non-Orthodox society of his parents in Springfield, Massachusetts. And so the key thing is to find a conducive environment and stay in that conducive environment. And so if the Israelites are in this slavery where there's a pharaoh that you're supposed to worship, it's just a bad influence. You got to get them out of there. And God is trying to bring them to a place where they can be in a more conducive environment for the religion as God understands it. Nan, Minya, Shirley, Steve, comments? Anyone? Okay, then.
I tend to agree with Evelyn as far as, the whole purpose of the Exodus was to observe and follow God and believe in God. That was the whole purpose of the Exodus. That's it.
Okay, so you support Evelyn. How many people agree with Evelyn? How many people believe in something else? Okay, you want to tell us what, Cy and Bernie?
Well, I don't have to believe in anything. As I read, I can accept some things and disregard others. I don't want to have an all-over belief. That kind of puts the manacles on me. I can't move. I can't think. I want to be able to think. And if I believe everything, I don't have to take the class.
I'm really concerned that neither Evelyn nor Cy are good candidates for my new cult. I've lost two already. Bernie, anything you'd like to add?
I'd like to back up a little bit about your cult and observe that it doesn't have to be God related, because we have that going on in this country now. The election deniers are certainly a cult.
Right, so you can form a cult around other things without a God-focused cult. But as a rabbi, I'd rather have God, involved there. But I suppose if I believed in Jewish space lasers, that might, And you could argue the UFO cult didn't really have a God either. I'm not sure the details, but they believed in that aliens, they're basically what we think of as God was a group of aliens that came in. So they, that was mistaken for God, but it was actually a group of Martians or Jupiterians or something. So yeah, so you could believe in election denial, or you can believe in, in anything. In Jamaica, I had a congregant who believed in all the conspiracy theories. So when I met with him, he goes one after the other, Kennedy was shot by the CIA, and then, long list of them, FBR was poisoned, and everything you could possibly think became part of his, belief system. And there must be websites that promote this sort of thing, and they must have separate threads for the different theories, and there are probably some of the people who go on that website believe in one of them, but probably a lot of them believe in all of them, because they like that sort of thing. So
Conspiracy theories, basically.
Yeah.
Some of them
Okay.
run for governor.
Okay, Minya, back to you. According to the author of the Zohar, page 35.
According to the author of the Zohar, God created one miracle after another to liberate the Israelites. Plagues were sent to convince Pharaoh to free the people. When they reached the Red Sea, God caused the waters to split and harden so that the Israelites could walk safely from one shore to the other on dry land. As soon as Pharaoh and his army entered the sea, God allowed the waters to crash in upon them, destroying the entire army. Many commentators ask, how can God allow such miracles? Would the world not be destroyed if the laws of nature, like gravity that causes the Red Sea to flow, were suspended even for a second? Zohar provides an answer. Quoting Rabbi Isaac, perhaps 2nd century CE, we are told that when the Israelites approached the Red Sea, God called upon the great angel who had been appointed to rule over it. At the time I created the world, God said to the angel, I appointed you angel over this sea, and I made an agreement with you that later, when the Israelites would need to pass through your waters, you would divide them. Now they have arrived at the sea. Open it and allow them to pass through safely.
All right, comments. This is.
Oh, my. Yeah, my comment is this is so reminiscent of the ancient Greek religions where you had a supreme god, such as Zeus, I think it was, and there were gods of Poseidon of the water and gods of whatever else, of the mountains, the clouds, the storms. And it's almost as if they're taking, who copied who, I don't know, but I suspect that this was from some other ancient religion that had been melded somehow or other into the psyche of whoever was writing this, to have the angel be a messenger for God to do a specific purpose. This is not one God. In spite of the fact that they're angels and it's not God doing it, somehow or other, he's dividing up all of these aspects of behavior, and it reminds me of idolatry in a sense. That sentence really rubs me the wrong way. I don't know why, but it just doesn't seem in keeping with God as we tend to think of him in our religion. I don't know how somebody else feels about it.
That's certainly blunt. So Evelyn is saying the Zohar, and by extension, wherever they're quoting from, which may be from the Talmud, are incorporating elements that are almost idolatrous, that believing in this angel that supervises this area is like, basically, there's a big God and a little God. Marcia,
I'm trying to remember what the Zohar book was exactly. So-
Zohar, oh, I was gonna tell you, the Zohar is the main text of Kabbalah.
That's
It
what I
was-
thought,
It
yeah.
was written in the 13th century by Moses de Leon, or it was compiled by Moses de Leon. He wrote that it was written by Shimon Bar Yochai in the cave, who was running from the Romans in the 2nd century, but that's not true. And so
So it's the Kabbalah beliefs.
it's and it's written in the form of a commentary to the Torah. So we could theoretically do a whole portion of the week based on the Zohar. We have a complete set of the English Hebrew Zohar in our library, but you really have to know how to use it, so I'm not sure I could successfely teach it.
So it is a approach to Judaism, to the Torah stories or
Yes.
the Bible,
And
basically.
it basically symbolizes everything into the Sfirot, the 10 emanations from God.
Right.
So Abraham represents an emanation from God, and that emanation has certain character traits, and so everything is then turned into this symbolic system.
So then it's not the Torah as it is written or the Bible as it is written. It is an approach to it or basically a commentary or a belief system built on it.
And more than one group have successfully built cults based upon Kabbalah.
So the story that we're reading about, whatever happened here with the angel story. So that's just their supposition about it.
Yeah.
Yes, and these cults are very territorial. So when I wrote my masterpiece, Contemporary American Judaism, about 12 or 13 years ago, I had a chapter in there about mystical outreach, which was going to be the Kabbalah Center that Madonna belongs to, plus the Chabad.
Mhm.
And the Kabbalah Center said they would sue me for millions of dollars.
Really?
The Chabad said, they said, change, we recommend you change this, or you're not accurate here. But they were nice enough, but the Kabbalah Center, so I had to hire a lawyer, and I was publishing with Columbia University Press, which is an Ivy League press. I expected them to support me. And I said, would you pay for the lawyer and fight? And they said, no, take it out. So I had to hire my own lawyer, and we made all sorts of changes to try to placate them. And then they said, it's still not good enough. We'll sue you anyway. So my lawyer said, no, they won't win, but they can sue you. And in American courts, it's almost impossible to get the other side to pay your legal expenses. So they could bleed you, they could sue you, and you'll have to pay millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. So, but you won't lose.
So what did you do?
I had to take it all out, but I was allowed to put in about 2 pages describing the legal battle with them, which I thought would make them look a lot worse than the actual text, which I was actually positive. The irony was I was positive toward them, but I would say, I think this is great, but somebody else doesn't. And I quoted other people that criticized, and they said, but I think that's not really fair. So I was actually in their favor. So they didn't like any criticism. So the fact that I was repeating other people's criticism, I was in favor. I was positive. That was what. And then more recently, we had a congregant who was apparently a member of another Kabbalah cult. And, and when I taught a Kabbalah course, their cult apparently told her to drop out of the temple because, she shouldn't be in an organization that's teaching Kabbalah from a more rational perspective.
Oh, she dropped out because of that?
So these groups are vicious, and they'll protect their members because that's, their members are feeding them money, and that's how they subsist. What's interesting is that not all cults today have to be where you're like the UFO cult all together physically. You can build a cult on the internet as well. But Kabbalah doesn't have to be a cult. You know, many people are teaching it in a more open way. But it's a completely different way of looking at Judaism, as you can see.
I
Yes,
think
Cy, and then Marcia.
Can you say this? I'm reading this book.
Oh, yes. Well,
And
are
this
you
is
quoted in there?
exactly what we're talking about. You know, you can't get one Jew to think that his neighbor is a good Jew if he does something a little bit different. And this author has got a whole book about that kind of stuff. And
Well,
this is
that's
what
why
we're
there's always
doing
two
now.
synagogues, one that you don't go to.
right.
Are you enjoying that book? Show it again, Cy. This is a new book called Bad Jews. It's gotten a lot of publicity. And hold it up again. There it is. It just came out a few
Just
months
hand over the
ago.
author.
I took it out the local library.
Yeah, who's the author?
The author is Emily Tompkin, Tamkin.
Yeah, so she said she was a bad Jew, and then she began to realize there were others, and now she's writing a book about it. Babette, Marcia, and then Babette.
I take issue with Harvey Fields putting this in here without some sort of a aside about how it fits into the story, that it is just a story that they have created, you know?
Yeah,
All
I
right, he
agree.
drops things in. He's expecting someone like me to be able to put it into context for you.
Thank you.
Um,
I thought it was a Kabbalah, but I wasn't, because we had the Kabbalah class and I remembered this, but you know, when they put it in this way, it gives it substance that it's real, you know, really part of something we should be believing in, you know.
yes, you don't have to believe in it unless you want to join a specific Kabbalah cult.
Thank you.
Babette.
Well, I had a thought about when there are so-called natural phenomena and contributing it to God, like eclipses, you know, eclipse happens. They can attribute that to some story, just like the Red Sea parting. Well, was it true there was like a wave that happened, just like eclipse happened, and that's God's, you know, way of speaking to you,
Mhm.
you know?
An eclipse is when one planet or satellite gets in the way of another.
Yeah, well, we've all seen them. Well, I've seen them, but can somebody say, well, it's God's punishment or something? Or when
Right.
the Red Sea parted, you just said, well, it's a sea of reeds and the chariots can, but you know, did it happen? And what is a natural phenomena?
Because part of this,
You know?
Babette, part of the problem is if God can suspend the laws of nature, then God could stop gravity suddenly, God could do, and that bothered the rabbis, as you see in the next paragraph. You know, there's sort of an assumption that once God, quote unquote, created the world, that God created nature and the laws of physics, and that these things are immutable. These things are gonna, you know, even if you believe God created them in whatever sense God created them, that they're there. And, you know, if the laws of physics suddenly stop for a few weeks, that's not acceptable, you know. So that's why I think they made this midrash, the Rabbi Isaac, that, you know, it needed to be pre-planned. It needed to go back to creation. So if God during the creation process said, well, there's going to be a time, you know, where it'll just stop for a few minutes, then it's not the laws of physics stopping. It's just part of the original plan. And that somehow made it more acceptable to the rabbis. I don't know if that helps. Pam? Okay. Then, Minya, you want to keep reading? We're in the top of page 35, right-hand column.
Clearly, the early rabbis were troubled by the Torah's claim that God had made a miracle at the Red Sea. Rabbi Isaac's explanation seems to overcome the problem by saying that the splitting of the sea had already been fixed or preordained at the time God created the world. In other words, God anticipated the need for dividing the Red Sea and programmed the event. Therefore, according to Rabbi Isaac, it was not a matter of the miraculous suspension of the laws of nature. Instead, the splitting of the Red Sea occurred exactly as God had pre-planned it. Other interpreters agree, but their explanations of what happened at the Red Sea are different. Some say that the splitting of the sea occurred in a natural way. Rabbi J.H. Hertz speculates that a strong east wind blowing all night and acting with the ebbing tide may have laid bare the neck of the water joining the Bitter Lakes to the Red Sea, allowing the Israelites to cross in safety. Rabbi Hertz also explains that a sudden cessation of the wind would convert the low, flat sandbanks first into a quicksand and then into a mass of waters, which would have drowned the pursuing Egyptians.
Uh-huh. And this Hertz was the chief rabbi of the British Empire when there was a British Empire. And so he's trying to sound more reasonable. Evelyn, does this explanation meet your critical?
Yes, it is more logical. We tend today to think, because of our information and science that has been discovered in the last 100 years or so, we tend to look for more rational physical explanations as opposed to theological ones. And I'm thinking of, there's an article last year about Sodom and Gomorrah, where the destruction of the city was the hand of God, and yet scientists digging in that same area have speculated that it was a meteorite that actually fell on the city, destroyed it. And why do they feel that? Because there are crystal formations that occur when a meteorite does hit the earth, and because of other excavations that have occurred where these same formations exist, and they have found it in these ancient sites where they speculate that Sodom and Gomorrah existed, the feeling is that, yes, theoretically, then it is possible that those few who did survive, or those from a fair distance, because the area itself would have been completely demolished, people incinerated, everything destroyed. But that would be one logical explanation of what could have happened, this cataclysmic occasion that got written down in history might have had an actual scientific explanation for it. And yeah, who's to say they're wrong? You know, it's logical and possible.
Pam, Minya, and Marcia,
And Steve,
and Steve.
Steve,
Thank you.
I like the idea that there's not an official Jewish explanation for the Red Sea or an official scientific explanation, because I think this is part of everybody's personal choice of how they want to read this. So, and the idea that, Rabbi Hertz felt the need that he had to give an explanation about, strong east wind blowing, etc. To me, that's kind of a waste of his time.
Mhm.
I think it's necessary, though.
Yeah. Well,
I guess, all right, I'll go next. I have a hard time with reading that this was a pre-programmed event. It's hard to understand that with every event and every purpose in life, that God has time to pre-program what he sees coming. The San Andreas Fault in California is going to eventually fall into the ocean. And is that also a pre-programmed event that we're supposed to accept because it's been told to us that it was programmed by God, so we're supposed to accept this? Pre-programmed is doesn't, in my opinion,
You
doesn't.
don't believe in Bereshit.
The problem
Yeah, I
is
do.
that the rabbis were worried if you forget the pre-programmed thing, then God is suddenly suspending the laws of nature. So they didn't like that. So they came up with this pre-programming idea as the lesser of two problems. But they felt that God to just suspend the laws of physics suddenly would be completely unacceptable. So it's not that they liked the pre-programming idea, they felt it was the lesser of two problems.
So it's used in other places also?
I do not know.
So, as I was saying to Minya though, so you do believe in things meant to be meant to be kind of thing.
But I believe in that more to do with relationships with people. I don't think that a major earthquake in Pakistan is something that has to do
Planned
with
by God,
being
not-
pre-programmed.
And then we've got Noah, where that story is all religions, all peoples have that flood story. So the Jewish people took the flood story and adapted it to their what was, the story that they wanted it to tell. Okay.
Right.
Right. So, we're adapting a story that something that happened to this, what we want to tell.
Steve?
No?
I agree in the fact that I don't believe it is a pre-planned. I think it was ordained by God at the time when it was needed. I just don't think it's pre-planned.
It wasn't on his list of to-do list, huh?
Well, I mean, it was needed at the time, not preordained.
You didn't see it coming.
Right.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Let's go back to the bottom of 35 to the little box and read just a short thing from my friend Maimonides and then a longer thing from Rabbi Roland Gittleson, who was a Reform rabbi in Boston in the previous generation. Minya, go ahead.
Starting with Maimonides in the box.
Yeah.
Correct.
Use of miracles. A miracle cannot prove what is impossible. It is useful only to confirm what is possible. Believing in miracles. In short, I do not believe in miracles, not if the word be interpreted in its usual sense as exceptions to the laws of nature. I believe in miracles only as occurrences and events that are far too marvelous for me fully to comprehend, but that are entirely consistent with nature's accustomed patterns. Do you know any word more descriptive than miracle for the fact that within the tiny submicroscopic cell each of us was at the moment of conception were already contained the seeds of all the physical traits, all the mental characteristics, all the emotional proclivities, all the creative possibilities of the adult we are today. Compared to that, a C-splitting in two is simple child's play. There are more miracles without magic in this universe than the wisest of us could ever identify. The trouble is that most of the time we're looking for them in the wrong places.
All right, well, so this is Rabbi Gittleson. What do you think about this? Bernie, is this acceptable to you as a theory of miracles in Reform Judaism? Yes.
I like
Sai?
it.
Well, what bothers me is that in the readings, and it keeps changing, the author is creating the miracle. Because that's what we're reading. He gets an idea, whoever he may be, at some point in time, and he says, this is what happened. And then further along, somebody else says, this is what happened. And they don't have to approve anything. They just make a bland statement. This is what happened. And we are expected in some cases to believe it. And I object to that.
You've made your objection clear.
So, so Cy, do you believe in the Red Sea parting?
Say again, Martha?
Do you believe in the parting of the Red Sea?
No, of course
No.
not.
Well, how did they get across that lake?
Well, who says they did? That's another story, another Bubba Meister.
You-
Dog paddle,
across, okay.
dog paddle.
But this is part of our religious mythology.
Oh,
So
that's it.
whether the Israelites actually crossed that river or not doesn't matter. It's what we can do with it today. And homiletically, I could give lots of sermons about it where it connects to our kind of religious orientation. So it's a way to say we need to be bold and brave and look forward and so forth. And it's part of our stories, ancient stories, in the way that for the Greeks, they had Zeus and Hera. And that was meaningful for them too, even if they didn't really believe in Zeus and Hera. No? Babette, Pam, Evelyn, anyone? Donna?
Not at the moment. Mhm.
Okay. All right, so then let's move toward the end. At the bottom of 36, I'm skipping Casuto, and I'm just going to the bottom of page 36, philosopher Martin Buber. Minya?
Philosopher Martin Buber seems to agree with Casuto, but from a different point of view. Buber argues that the details of what happened at the Red Sea are not important. What is decisive, he writes, is that the children of Israel understand this as an act of their God, as a miracle. Buber explains that from a historical point of view, a miracle is an abiding astonishment, a feeling of surprise and awe that people sense in especially significant moments. That is what happened at the Red Sea and afterwards. The Israelites saw Pharaoh's advancing army drowned and destroyed. They were astonished by the events that saved them. At that moment, as Buber comments, the people saw in whatever it was they saw the great hand of God. Afterwards, generations of Jews who retold the story continued to find in it traces of wonder that they identified as the miraculous work of God. Whatever happened at the Red Sea, it is clear that the Egyptians were defeated and the Israelites went forth to freedom. The victory was surprising, a critical turning point in Jewish history. For those who were there and for those who would tell the tale afterwards, something momentous and astonishing happened. God split the sea, saved the Israelites, and assured their liberation. All of this seemed more than the work of ordinary people. Something wonderful occurred, something awesome beyond human comprehension. So they called their victory a miracle.
Uh-huh. All right, we have two things here. We have Martin Buber, and then we have Harvey Field sort of summarizing. The two are quite different. If you look at Buber, you can see he's more in Bernie's thinking, and then Harvey Field is trying to basically, take a middle position. Comments on Buber?
I like that story.
So, yeah,
Comment. I think it's
yeah, it's logical, makes sense to me at any
Yeah, I'm
rate.
on Team Boober.
What is decisive is that the children of Israel understood this as an act of their God as a quote unquote miracle.
Right.
It's how we understand it, not what happened, that counts. And I think that
What its goal was.
and then what about Harvey Fields' conclusion? Do you buy into that or less so?
I do.
I have
Yeah,
a
that-
question.
Yes.
Actually, Well, is it a natural phenomenon? Has it happened again? Does the Red Sea, the sea reeds part on an annual or
It
semi-annual
does apparently.
basis? I mean, I don't know the answer,
Yes,
but
I
does
remember,
it?
I remember Rabbi Moore saying that that does. It's not a sea, it's a large lake, basically, and it does
Marcia,
have
could
the sea.
if you could send documentation on that, that would be helpful.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
Yeah,
But if
if I
she-
find it, I'll send it to you,
If it
Rabbi.
happened once by natural phenomena, did it happen? Does it?
Does that change your attitude toward Judaism today, whether whether she can produce such an article or not?
Well, at a
No.
propitious time, I don't know.
Okay.
I
we
think
have
the
time.
the details of what happened, again, I agree with Buber that how it happened is less important. It's an interesting story, but it's the result that is important. The fact that it got them out of Egypt into the new land. This was what was critical. And whatever story was made up, whether based on realism or fabricated, I think in the long run is less relevant than the final result, shall we say. Anyone else?
Pam,
Isn't that what a rabbi does? He tells us what's important, and does, what God is trying to tell us, as opposed to, the details of, did the water do this or did the water do that? So that, to me, that's why I'm kind of on Team Buber on this.
but that's interesting. So Pam is expecting me to distill all the details and give you the bottom line. What does God expect from us? What you could argue exactly the reverse and say rabbis purpose is to bring a little bit more of details, the things that you wouldn't be able to come up with on your own, and then you each have the right and the responsibility to come up with your own sort of bottom line, what you believe and how you believe it. So I guess you could see the rabbis doing the macro work or the micro work,
That's fair. That's fair.
Interesting.
Your
I
choice.
I find it interesting that in everybody's different ideas and what everyone thinks, to me, it shows what everybody thinks themselves about God, or who is God, and what he is capable of doing or not doing. And I just find all that very, very interesting.
For my newly emerging cult, I'm going to take my followers up to Lake Pleasant, is it called? And we're going to march straight in the middle of the lake, and we're going to part the lake into two. And so there's a sign up. So far, Evelyn is the only one that has signed up, but we're hoping for other believers.
Who said I signed up?
Whoop, whoop.
Were you in an
Um,
ark at the time?
Evelyn,
No,
it was
we're-
predetermined.
We're taking bicycles.
It was predetermined, Evelyn.
It was.
All right,
Written in the
okay.
stars,
Um,
okay.
We have 2 adult education courses starting, one this week, I think, and one next week. America's 4 Gods, which talks about 4 different views of God that, from very traditional to very not traditional. And then next week, we're starting a course on gratitude, which is part of Musar or part of Jewish character development. And so you're invited to sign up for either or both of these. And we have lots of activities coming up, as you know. So I'll turn it over to Steve to
Okay,
conclude.
can I just-
And
Marcia, you have a comment?
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Go
I
ahead.
just was glancing at what it says about the Sea of Reeds. This is a major undertaking because nobody seems to want to agree where this all happened. The location, they've mentioned like 3 or 4 or 5 locations as Yam Suf that it could be in different areas in the region. So it's, the whole thing's, it's complicated. Okay.
All right, let us conclude with the blessing after Torah study.
Yes.
Ready, set, go. Baruch
Atah Adonai Eloheinu
melech haolam, asher
asher natamanu Torat emet.
b'chayei olam
Atah B'Tohenu.
Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah
Adonai
Adonai,
noten
noten
haTorah.
haTorah.
Blessed is Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who has given us the teaching of truth and planted it within us.
Giving us the eternal life. Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah.
Amen. All right, everyone, have a fabulous rest of the week,
Thank you.
and
And we shall try.
take care.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi.